Hello and happy Wednesday. It's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am making a card for the Brutus Monroe Inspiration Team blog hop, and we were challenged with gnomes. So I'm going to be using this Gnome Place Like Home stamp set. And so let's get into it. I've got several pieces of cardstock that I've already trimmed down. This one will fit that little panel of gnomes pretty perfectly. The one in the middle does kind of come off the top, but I don't mind because I have a plan. I am covering that with my embossing bag, my magic powder bag, so that I don't get embossing powder where I don't want it, and then I'll sweep away the excess using my Nouveau brush. I'm going to ink up those gnomes with the Brutus Monroe embossing ink, and then I'll stamp that down. You won't be able to see much, which is one of the downsides to stamping onto a lighter cardstock. You really have a hard time seeing what you've stamped and what you didn't get a good impression of, but I ended up having a decent impression, which is why the Misty is so handy. And then I'm going to cover that with some Icicle embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. This is a clear embossing powder, and you won't be able to see much as I'm doing here. You can tell that they are there, but you really can't tell a whole lot. And it'll get even worse once I start heat embossing that. So I'm holding this up in the light at an angle so that I can see what I am melting, and you'll be able to see it just gets a little bit shiny if you've never really worked with embossing powder before. You use your heat tool till it is smooth and melted, and you'll be able to tell because it goes from a matte look to a shiny look. And I'll just keep holding that up in the light to make sure that I don't have any loose powder. Alright, now I want to do some ink blending, so I have grabbed out my Waffle Flower Media Mat. This is nice because it does hold the paper in place pretty decently. You don't have to have your fingers all over the place. And I've got some Distress inks, and those colors are Salty Ocean. That's my first color. And I forgot to mention, I'm stamping this just onto some Neenah Classic Crest cardstock. It has a smooth finish, so the ink blending goes on pretty nicely. And then I'm going to move to the next color, which is a little bit darker. And this is the Chipped Sapphire. And I just like how it gives that, just deepens the color along the edges, which is all I'm really doing. And I like how my little gnomes are resisting the ink, which is why I did the clear embossing powder. And then I'll go over the top of that just to make sure I have a good blend using that Salty Ocean. I'm going to use my Aqua pigments in the color Pearl, so it's not really a color. It's more of a white clear, and it just has some mica in it, and so it just adds a little bit of shimmer to it. I'll put a little bit of that into one of my little wells, and I'll take a paintbrush, and I don't add any water to that paintbrush, and I just splatter that all over. I didn't want the color to be too diluted. And then all it's going to do is just add little shimmery dots to the background. I did buff away some of that color over the top of those gnomes, even though it didn't stick too much. And now I'm going to take another piece of that Neenah Classic Crest cardstock. I was inspired by Lauren last week. Lauren on the Inspiration Team, she had made this gorgeous like geode kind of card. It was so pretty. And so I wanted to do a little bit of something sort of like that. So I'm tearing my edges of my paper. And then I'm going to use some embossing ink just on those edges. I'm not concerned about getting that ink all over simply because my gnomes will cover a lot of that background. And then I'll wipe away the mess that I made. And then I will cover that with some sterling embossing powder. And I'm not using the sterling sparkle, I'm just using the regular sterling. And then I will pick up my mess, grab my reverse tweezers so I can hold that in place, and then I'm going to heat set that till that is smooth and melted. It's just neat when you tear the paper, which is so old school, which I love. It's bringing it back to the things we used to do when we didn't have all these really cool tools. So I loved tearing the edges, and then that embossing powder just kind of sits in there, and it's so neat. All right, for my next piece, I have some more of that Neenah Classic Crest cardstock in there. I'm going to ink this up with my Raven Detail ink and just stamping it down a couple times. I'm actually going to pull out my colored pencils this time. That's funny, I'm on a little bit of a colored pencil kick right now, and this is my little carrier. I got this for Christmas from my mom and her husband, and I love this little pouch. It holds all of my colored pencils, and this is just the front pouch. There is another zippered pouch that has just as many slots as this one does, and I believe this is my set of 72, so I have quite a bit more room to be able to put a lot of colored pencils in there. So I'll just show you roughly what I'm doing, And with colored pencils, you definitely, if you're wanting to add any sort of shading at all, you want to have a light hand, which I typically do not have. I am definitely very heavy-handed when it comes to most of my mediums. I don't know why. I just always, even as a child, used to just hold my pencils so hard. But you want to try. You're going to have to think about it. You're going to want to try to have a very soft hand when you first start, because it's all about building up the color. So like with most mediums, it isn't going to look like much when you first get started, and you may even be tempted to quit, but you'll definitely want to keep working it. So what I've done is I started with my lighter blue that I put down, and then I grabbed my darker blue, and I'm just putting that in the dark areas where I would want some of my shadowing to be. And then I'll go over the top of that with my light blue pencil again. It definitely helps to make sure that your pencils are nice and sharp. And then I will go back over that again with my dark colored pencil. Now these build up, and so if you start off really heavy-handed, you will build up a lot of wax, and it'll be really hard to blend out those colors, which is why it's so important to go light-handed. And you can eventually start going a little bit darker when you're thinking, okay, this is going to be my last, maybe my last layer. You can go down and do a little bit heavier-handed, and you don't have to worry about the wax buildups as much. So I'll just keep going back and forth until I'm happy with the vibrancy of the colors. And then I'm even adding it just a little bit on his arms. For his shoes, I started off very light with that blue. That was the darker blue. And then I did another dark layer where I wanted my shadowing just with the darker pencil that I had. I only used 2 blue pencils. I am using 1 pencil for his skin tone. And then I am going to use 1 just for the gray areas of his beard and the little white areas around his hat and his gloves and his shoes. So I don't use a lot of colors. I just use a few. You could go a little crazy and you could add even darker colors, but I decided to go just with 2 color blend on the hat and then leave everything else as just 1 color, leaving a lot of white space. I did come in with a white marker because trying to use a gel pen over the top of that wax was a little bit difficult. Now I'm using my Not Your Mama's heavyweight cardstock for my base, and I'm telling you right now, if you see that stuff in stock, you buy it. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go buy it, because it is sold out usually right away when they get it in. And I am about out, so when I see it, man, I'm going to be buying it. I'm stamping my sentiment using some of that same embossing ink, and then I'm going to cover that with one of my favorite embossing powders. This is the Raven Sparkle. So it is black, but it also has a bit of that glitter in it, and so it just, it's heavenly. And I did get a little bit, because I was living on the edge there, I did get a little bit on my mat, but I wiped it away with a microfiber cloth. Then I'll heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And then I do trim it down just kind of in a square. I'll change that up a little bit later, because now it's time to start adhering my pieces. I'm using some of the Brutus Monroe craft glue to adhere down my panel onto my embossed background. And then I decided I want my sentiment fussy cut out, which doesn't take much. It's super easy. I just liked the look of the fussy cutting. Didn't want the big bulky square. And now I will use my bone folder to make sure that my card base is nice and scored. And then I'll use that same craft glue to adhere down my panel onto my card base. And then I'm going to put some foam tape on the back of my little gnome. And he's going to go right over the middle gnome there. That's why I wasn't so concerned about his hat not being fully stamped. I thought that was fine. So once I get all that foam tape pulled off, or the release paper pulled off of the foam tape, I will stick my little gnome down to the top. So cute. And then I'll use just some craft glue to stick down my sentiment. And I'll put a couple of blocks on that to make sure that dries. And then it dries flat. Then I do decide, which I should have done ahead of time, I'm going to stamp the little gnomes on the inside of the card. And I am going to use that same Distress ink. Now this is not formulated for stamping, so you'll notice it's very splotchy when it stamps. But I didn't care because it's just on the inside of the card. That's not the point. I'll have writing in there, and hopefully that'll be most of the focus. But yeah, I'll just stamp that on the inside, and when I'm done with that, that's going to finish off our little gnome card. Gnomes are hot right now. So yeah, I love him. He's so cute. So as I said, this is a part of a blog hop, so I'll have my blog listed down below so that you can go and check it out, and you can check out what the rest of the inspiration team has been doing. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye, guys.